Hello, welcome to Inside the Tape with Greg Cosell on the Inside the Birds platform, the very last Inside the Tape of the 2024 NFL season. And of course, the Eagles, Greg, are Super Bowl champions. They destroy the Kansas City Chiefs 40-22 down in New Orleans in the Bayou. And we are going to have you break this one down. Some of the significant parts of the game, we'll go through it on tape. And listen, you were there live, so I guess my question is, when you're watching something live, and I don't think you go to too many live football games. You're always at home watching.
No, I do go to the Super Bowl every year, but I don't really go to live football games. Yeah.
Right. When you go and see it live, are you doing like the mental checklist? Like, how is that compared to when you
A
go
little
back?
bit. I did that in this game. I was just curious. I actually was sitting pretty high up at right on the 50-yard line. So
Mhm.
it was actually a really good seat, given that I'm a tape guy, so I could really see everything. And as I mentioned to you, in a text, I said the first thing I noticed, particularly with the Eagles defense, which was obviously the defining feature of the game, the first thing I noticed was they were lining up in a too high safety structure on every play. Remember, I texted you that, and I say, hey, and again, I wasn't, then breaking down exactly what they were doing, but that was extremely noticeable. And the other thing that was, of course, noticeable was that they didn't blitz. So those two things were noticeable just watching the game without sitting there charting or taking notes.
Yeah, yeah, we'll get into that because I was almost shocked myself. I mean, when you watch the game, you could tell they were relying heavily on a four-man rush, but then when I heard they didn't blitz, I thought it was sort of the the proverbial, oh, they didn't have to blitz. No, they literally did not send
Well, that
a
was the game
single
plan,
five-man
clearly.
pressure. Yeah.
And you know how I work, Jeff. I'm a process guy. So when I'm watching tape, I'm thinking about what were the coaches thinking to do what they were doing.
Hmm.
And that's exactly what I was thinking watching their defensive tape, when I came back to the office and I spent Tuesday really grinding through it. I spent 4 hours watching each side of the ball, which, I can't do during the season, because I have so many games to get through. But I knew I was going to do that on Tuesday. I just had one game to do and I did it. But it made me just start to think, okay, why did they do this? When Vic Fangio, when they won the NFC Championship, and Vic Fangio, he's not celebrating that. To him, that's, now it's just another game. Now you got to play another game. So I guarantee on Monday morning after that NFC Championship, he's going hard on the Chiefs offense, studying him in detail, and I just kept thinking to myself, what clicked in his mind to believe that this was the best game plan approach? Because let's say by chance, Jeff, and you know how this works, that for whatever reason it didn't work. Now I'm sure there was a plan B. You don't have one plan, but people would have said, and you know how it works. Oh, terrible game plan. You're not pressuring him at all. You're blah blah. You know how that goes. But he clearly felt that this was the way to go. And the bottom line is, and if you're just being realistic about tape, that's what I try to do anyway, just be realistic about what I see. There were three offensive linemen on the Chiefs that are below average NFL starters. Tooney as a tackle, Caliendo at left guard, and Taylor at right tackle. They're below average NFL starters.
Hmm.
And the Eagles clearly believed that they could beat those guys just with their own players who were good and the athleticism of their players. And then starting with the Cooper DeJean interception return for a touchdown, which was the first time they stunted. They were a heavy stunt team with multiple concepts, which really accentuated their athleticism. And they just ate up that O-line. I mean, Mahomes was not a comfortable player at all.
Right.
He started
Right.
to play fast. He was anticipating pressure. He was perceiving pressure. And he was playing very fast as the game progressed.
Yeah, the outcome of the game and the way it went, Greg, left me thinking in a very odd way that maybe this was the best coaching job and quarterbacking job done by Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes throughout their history because they were really, really limited up front on the offensive line. And even watching them from an offensive playmaking standpoint outside of Worthy, it looked like Kelsey just didn't have his juice. It looked like obviously DeAndre Hopkins
No.
had a drop. They just looked like a team that had crossed the finish line before the game and had nothing left. And I'm
You
not
know,
trying to get anyone. The Eagles made that happen. Let me be
Oh,
clear.
yeah, and it's
But
funny you say that because you think back, and of course, once you have access to the results, and particularly given that the game was a blowout, it's easy, this is what we do. And I started thinking about it, and you know, the Chiefs were not really a running team this year. They had success running at times. They certainly had success in the AFC Championship game, against the Bills, running the ball selectively, and but the O-line was an issue. If you think back, we know Hollywood Brown was injured most of the year, but if you look at their last 4 or 5 games, Brown was not a factor. They traded for Hopkins. He was not a factor really at all for them. I
Right.
mean, which is kind of odd. And while Kelsey still caught 90 plus balls, he only averaged 8.5 yards a reception, and that's really low. And had way fewer catches that resulted in first downs than in previous years by a wide number, like 25. I mean, a big number. So if you really look at it, and actually this what we're saying is how great Mahomes is because
That's
they
our point.
really didn't have very much, or it didn't play out that way.
Right. Right. They got, as Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And the Eagles punched them in the mouth pretty early, and they just didn't have a plan for recovery. So let's talk about. I like that you said you spent 4 hours on each side of the ball over 2 days. So let's get into the big part, which is defensively.
Yes.
Eagles defense against this Kansas City offense. Now, no blitzing. You mentioned that. And what did you observe about the back end and the fact that Vic was
Yeah.
able to play in a lot of too high structures?
Every play, not 90%, every play started with a too high structure that looked like quarters. Um, and over 75% of the defensive snaps ended up in a too high structure.
Hmm.
Obviously, it wasn't 100%, but they started that way 100% of the time. There were times they did play some cover three where Blankenship dropped down as an underneath hook defender in cover three. They played a few snaps of man, not that many, um, but they predominantly played the variations of too high, which are cover four, cover six. So people understand what cover six is. It means you're playing cover two to the short side of the field to the boundary, and cover four to the wide side of the field. They played some snaps of cover eight, which is the opposite. It's cover two to the wide side of the field and cover four to the boundary. And they caught Mahomes a couple of times. I remember when they played cover eight, and I think I put this in my notes. He wanted to throw a hitch to his receiver, which against a cover four would have been fine because corners are generally off in cover four. But this time they went cover eight, and that meant that Mitchell was a roll down corner because he was playing on the cover two side of the defense. So therefore, he's basically a flat defender, and he was rolled down, and Mahomes couldn't make that throw. And then so they just. I thought the execution on the back end, the discipline, the eye discipline, the matching of routes, to me, I mean, the DeJean touchdown is obviously a huge play, and everybody saw it 100 times. But what the Chiefs tried to do there was overload the coverage. They went what we call four strong. There were four receivers to one side, which normally a zone coverage can't handle.
Mhm.
The Eagles did such a good job matching the routes that DeJean was actually a free defender.
Hmm.
And Mahomes made what most people would say is a rookie mistake. I mean, he threw it right to DeJean as if he didn't know DeJean was there.
Right.
But I thought that really spoke to how well that they were playing. I mean, like I said, the Chiefs came up with a four strong concept, but the Eagles matched the routes perfectly from an execution standpoint. DeJean was free, and it was beautiful. I mean, and that was their first stunt of the game too.
Yeah, and so the watching them play defense on tape, I mean, it felt like their plan was let's put a cloud around the field with everybody in coverage and
Yep.
make them try to throw into windows and let our front four eat. Now, the give and take to that is that you are inviting an offense to run. And we know that even though 2 years ago, Andy Reid did run the ball very well and frequently against the Eagles, they didn't, as you said, have much of a running game this year. And it certainly seemed that Vic's strategy was, I don't believe they're going to run even if we invite them to.
I mean, it made me think back. I don't think it was quite as extreme, but it made me think back to Bill Belichick and Bill Parcells in that Super Bowl against the Bills. I believe it was the Scott Norwood Super Bowl, where the Bills had the phenomenal passing game with Jim
Mhm.
Kelly, with Lofton, with Reed, with
Yeah.
I know I'm missing another wide receiver. And Belichick sort of took the approach. hey, if they want to hand the ball to Thurman Thomas, he's a great back, yeah, but we just can't give up big pass plays. And they were inviting the Chiefs to run the ball. When you
Mm.
play too high, you're inviting an offense to run the ball because the numbers favor an offense to run the ball. And the Chiefs only had 20 plays in the first half, which is a very low number, obviously, but only three of those plays were runs by a running back. Now, they didn't have success running it, but to me, and again, they asked me last when we did our Patreon, that, they know that I don't rip coaches and I don't, but I just felt that, hey, you had to try to run the ball a little bit. I mean, just to change the flow and tempo of the game.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, especially if they're inviting you to do it, you got to try to. I can understand
Yeah,
that.
because the run game, even if you gain 5 yards, on first down, that's good play.
Right.
And the defense starts to think a little differently, but obviously they didn't. And look, Andy Reid's won a lot of games. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Fame coach, so I'm not smarter than Andy Reid, but I just felt that, and I know for a fact that that was part of the plan, that the Eagles were inviting them to run the ball.
I know you told the Patreon crew that you thought Reed Blankenship sort of played a very quietly
I
impressive
did,
game.
yes.
And what did you observe on the tape that made you feel that way?
Uh, obviously he almost always played on the back end. I mean, there were times he did drop down, in cover three, but he almost always played on the back end. And normally he would play more to the boundary than to the field. So in the Vic Fangio scheme, let's say it's a 3-by-1 set. In the Vic Fangio scheme, and it's funny, I got a chance to talk to a coach over the summer who's knows the scheme totally, and you could see it in the game. In the Vic Fangio scheme, the corner essentially matches the boundary X receiver man to man. He runs with him, that's how they do it. So with Blankenship being the boundary safety, his eyes go right inside. And he's really responsible for any routes that come toward him or he can help out. I just thought that he had such great awareness and understanding of what he was seeing that it just made it hard for the pass game for the Chiefs.
Hmm.
And again, this is not a stat thing; it's not on the stat sheet, but I've been fortunate in my career to be in defensive back meetings. Okay, and in fact, I was in one with Denard Walker, who was with the Eagles, but it's when he was with the Jets, and they talk about leverage and eye discipline all the time. Those are two words. You have to maintain a certain body position so you don't get beat. And then eye discipline, you have to know exactly what you're looking at and understand what you're looking at. And I think Blankenship is really, really good in those areas. And I thought it really showed in this game.
Yeah, Greg, one thing that jumped out to me, and I tried to make it in the post game, is that I think when you're watching the game, especially on TV, you're thinking, man, this defensive line was just so suffocating. And it was. They did a great job. But I also noticed in my own tape watching that Mahomes at times had the ball where he wanted to go and
Yeah.
he had a pat or couldn't. And that is the coverage element causing the pressure. There were a couple of times where a guy just beat a guy up front. That happened. That will. But to me, it wasn't like one guy just game wrecking up front, like sometimes we've seen Jalen Carter do, or
No.
Micah Parsons. This was to me about the marriage between the coverage and the rush.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, obviously there were times that the pass rush ate and he didn't really have time to work through progressions, but there were other times where he did have time and he just wasn't seeing it. Now, I think that there weren't a ton of open receivers where you go, oh my God, he's just missing guys that are wide open. And
Right.
because I think they did such a good job of squeezing windows and making it hard. But still, he was an uncomfortable player, Mahomes, that is, and you could tell as the game progressed. I mean, and you know what's funny? The first play of the game, by the way, was their only first down in the entire first half, which was a really cool RPO
Yeah.
concept, and they really
Yep.
didn't come back to anything like that. I didn't feel
Same
that they did watching the tape. It just didn't seem like they came back to that.
Right. I was thinking the same thing. I thought it was a little nifty, almost like a fake bubble in the middle, bam, and then they got him. And then the one play that jumped out, I didn't clip it, but just to describe the difference between this year's secondary and last year's is I think it was their second or third drive. The Chiefs came out in 12 personnel heavy, and then they worked a play action. And the whole point was to try to get Worthy down the left side one on one, which
Oh,
they
the
did.
one where Mitchell ran with him the whole
Yeah,
way?
Mitchell's running with the fastest receiver in the game, 30, 40
Mitchell
yards
was
downfield.
Velcro to his inside hip. I mean, and he wanted to make that throw. That was the play call.
He
And he
did. You could
wanted to
see
make
him.
that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And the
Yeah.
other one, which was really interesting, and this is where pressure helped, and I think I talked about it. Maybe I can't remember last night with the Patreon group. Was that 3rd and 3 on the second possession where Worthy out of the backfield ran the go route and he got on top of Bond, and that was the play because obviously they knew based on how the Eagles play cover four that Bond had to run with Worthy, given that Worthy was number 3. He
Right.
became number 1, but he started at number 3 in the backfield,
Hmm.
and Bond had to run with him. And if Mahomes had time, that might have been a long. It probably would have been a long touchdown, but that was a play where Sweat just ate up Tooney. A play where Tooney's lack of arm length really showed up. He just because Sweat got one arm stab and Tooney just couldn't reach him. I mean, he just couldn't reach him.
Right. Last thing on the defense, the defensive line, which we obviously saw gave work to the Chiefs' offensive line. What did you observe about any line games, stunting,
Ah,
positional alignment, anything that stood out to you
the
there?
stunts started to stand out. I mean, as I said, the Cooper DeJean interception was the first time they stunted, and then it seemed like they stunted an awful lot. In fact, I was surprised that the number was so low, but it was still high. But I mean, it just seemed like they were stunting on every play.
Hmm.
They just wanted to play to their athleticism, and it was really good stuff. Really good stuff. Uh, you know, I think Eagles fans should be really excited about Jalix Hunt. This kid's going to be a really good football player. I mean, the way he progressed this season, and he had some really strong rushes in this game throughout the last half of the season. We talked about him as a run defender as well. I mean, I would assume next year. I don't know what Josh Sweat is a free agent, right?
He is a free agent. Yep.
I don't know what their plan is, but it's very possible that Hunt and Smith could be their edge players next year. And I think they two young guys who dramatically improved as the season progressed. I mean, I just think back to the way Nolan Smith took on the pulling guard Trey Smith, and he just stood him up. And Trey Smith weighs 100 more pounds.
Yeah.
Nolan Smith really improved as this season came on. Surprised me. I got him, that's coaching. I know who coaches him, and I've had the conversations with him. So, that's where you just don't know. Like I was, as everybody knows, I'm on record. It's easy to say, "Well, I'm wrong. You're an idiot." But I thought he'd have to switch to being a stack backer. I really did. And by the way, I wasn't the only one who thought that.
Yeah, no, there were a lot
But
of NFL personnel people who felt that they weren't sure where he
right. So,
was
but I mean, the
going.
way that kid progressed, and I know he's a great kid, so I'm sure that plays a major part in it because he's a very coachable kid. He's a smart kid. But I mean, I could see Hunt, and if they don't sign Sweat, and again, we don't know the answer to this, and we don't know what the market would be, for Sweat at this point in his career. Um, but I could see Hunt and Smith being their edge players next year, and I think they'd be in good shape.
Yeah, oh, man, when you think about what he did to Trey Smith on that pull, and then a couple of weeks ago against the Packers, putting Elkton Jenkins out, a Pro Bowl right guard,
Oh
and
yeah, and those
same
were run plays
tackle.
where
Yeah,
those were not bad. And he learned how to pass rush. You can't just run around. We talked about this. You can't just run around offensive linemen. He really learned how to use his hands, how to make them a factor. He really improved dramatically.
awesome. All right, why don't we transition over to the offense? Obviously, the Eagles were explosive offensively. They hit some big plays. Not as explosive in the run game, maybe for the first
No,
time in weeks and weeks. Is that something that was by design from what you observed Steve Spagnuolo do?
well, they didn't necessarily load the box. They clearly played downhill with a lot of desire. Um, But I thought they had some really good run blitzes on first down, sometimes on second down. And I thought the way they deployed their safeties was really intelligent because they would start in a two shell, and then one of the safeties would come down basically into a gap where it probably looked like to Barkley that, hey, that gap's going to be open because the safety, when he starts to play is, 12 yards off the ball. And then the gap would close because the safety would come down at the snap. And I thought they did a really, really good job with that. But in general, I thought even their linebackers did a really good job of reading run blocks. Like you might remember the play, I think Blasingame played 2 snaps in the game. The first one, Chanel just went downhill with tremendous velocity and ate up Blasingame and made the tackle. So
Right.
they clearly, when they saw the offensive line show run action, their second level players hit it. But they
Yeah.
didn't line up, with 9 in the box or anything like people might have thought just because Barkley's numbers weren't good. But they did a really good job. And by the way, this was not one of the better games. It's hard to because they won so big and they blew them out. This was not one of the better games for the Eagles O line.
Yeah.
Becton had some bad one-on-one blocks. Dickerson, and I give him all the credit in the world. He was just fighting through the game because he's got that injury, that knee injury. He was just fighting through the game. So you got to give him a ton of credit.
Yeah, the way the first quarter was going, Greg, when it was, somewhat of a close game, I was a little worried because there were some times he just atypically allowed some inside penetration or got pushed
Yeah,
back.
yeah. You're
So,
right about that.
yeah,
I mean, I
yeah,
noticed that too watching the tape, and I'm thinking, oh, this is not a great game for their O-line.
right, right. It was a very good game for Jalen Hurts in their passing game, their passing concepts as well. Kellen Moore goes out with some really, good play calls. What jumped out to you from a passing game standpoint?
Um, I would say the passing game was, what we've kind of seen all year. I mean, obviously Hurts, well, he had some really critical runs in the third and fourth quarter, and
Yeah.
that's a major part of his game. Those are backbreakers. I mean, when you talk about Jalen Hurts, we know what his strengths are as a passer. We know he has limitations as a passer, but that running element, and people can say whatever they want. Oh, he's not explosive. He's not this. He's not that. He is a really good runner. I mean, he may not be Lamar Jackson or Daniels in terms of straight line speed,
Hmm.
although he's not slow, but because I think on that 44-yard touchdown he had in the playoffs, he was moving pretty good as I recall.
Yep.
But he's got a bigger body, so he looks different running. But those are big things in games, really big things. And he made enough throws. I mean, critical throws. There were two that really stand out to me on third down. One, you'd never see the highlight. I put in my notes. I'm sure you remember when he hit Smith for 9 yards on 3rd and 8, where
Yes.
they tried to show pressure and then they backed out, and he
Yep. Yep.
saw it immediately
Yep.
and hit his back foot and got rid of the ball to Smith in his own void, and they get 9 yards on 3rd and 8. You'll never see that on a highlight play. Those are really good quarterback plays, really good quarterback plays. And then on the 3rd and 7, when he hit Smith on the back shoulder fade, I mean, you couldn't have handed it to him any better because that was great coverage by McDuffie. And that was just a beautiful, beautiful throw by Jalen Hurts. And they got 22 yards on 3rd and 7. And obviously the long touchdown, which, that was a shot play on the first play after the Chiefs gave the ball up on downs. But there was a background to that. They
Hmm.
were in the pistol for the 7th time in the game. The first 6, they ran the ball. And one or two of those runs were gap schemes, so they showed gap scheme run. Now, when you're going deep over the top, the second level defenders, even if they hit the run hard, they're not making the play on Smith anyway. But the point is, that whole look said to them run because they did it 6 times previously and they ran the ball. And then they ran a route concept that would have worked against single high or cover 4. It would have worked either way. And they got cover 4, and he hit Smith, who just beat Watson immediately off the ball.
Yeah, they picked on Watson as you would expect
Yeah,
them to do with the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. One pass that really jumped out to me. You'll probably remember it as I set it up, only because it may have been one of those cases where that's not the guy he should throw it to, but because this time he did it decisively, I liked it. Whereas in other times throughout the year, Greg, we've said you can't be indecisive there or see it, throw it, trust it, plant your foot. It was the pass to Goddard in the zone on the right side that actually was a little. He got the pass interference call on it. I think AJ Brown is running underneath
Oh,
on the
you're talking about,
play.
oh, you mean the unsportsmanlike when Goddard got hit?
Yes,
Yeah, I
yes,
mean
and I liked it because he made a decisive decision to do it and throw it
and
there.
again, I know exactly the play you're talking about. I mean, obviously this game I've spent so much time, I can still see all the plays.
Right.
Um, I think that's open to question because I don't know how he's coached on that. I mean, it's easy to say because Brown was running kind of a delayed slant at the sticks and he
Uh-huh.
was open, but Goddard was open too. So I don't know how they coach that. So I don't want to necessarily say he threw it to the wrong guy.
Fair.
Um,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's the stuff you don't know. You don't know how they coach that.
right.
Could he have thrown it to Brown? Sure. But Goddard was open.
The decision making, though, the idea to put the foot in the ground and
Yep.
make that throw to Goddard to me was there and probably more, I guess, pervasive throughout the game for him than some of the times during the season where we say like, he's just not, he just doesn't trust it. He's holding it. He seemed much more decisive in this
Yeah, and
game.
I think that's what you're looking for. I mean, you're looking for him to be decisive. I mean, Tom Brady's talked about this a lot because he's had Eagles games, the last,
Yeah.
number of weeks about, Jalen Hurts just hitting the back foot and letting it go. I mean, you really want every quarterback to do that. But I also think he has such a good feel for when there's space. I mean, he had that run in the third quarter. It was the one where they actually played man coverage and they were keying the back with both linebackers and the other linebacker, because it was Chenal and Bolton.
Hmm.
And whoever was not going to match the back became the spy. And he ran for like 14, 15 yards and Chenal, tracked him down. But Chenal became the spy. But, Jalen just had a feel because all the routes were to his right. And he just had a feel that, hey, there's space and just go. Those are important plays. And you can't say they're bad and by the way, I didn't think he had a clean throw on that anyway.
Hmm.
But even if you wanted to debate whether he could have thrown it, the point is that's a part of his game, and that gets first downs.
Right. Absolutely. All right, let's take a look at some clips, Greg. And one thing I wanted to highlight was what you mentioned about the back end playing with physicality, closing lanes. So there are a couple of plays that I thought really illustrated that. So this is the second drive of the Chiefs.
Oh yeah, this was the one. This was one of the few snaps where they're playing man.
Right, right. I also
And
made
and
it.
and remember, we talked. Everybody was concerned about Blankenship on Kelsey, and I said that wouldn't happen, and it didn't happen
Right.
because to me that's an easy answer. Like Blankenship was not going to play Kelsey, and I said I can't remember if I said it to you. Obviously, I did a zillion shows on Radio Row, and I said that if the Eagles do play man and they're not going to play heavy man, I said my guess is DeJean's going to be on Kelsey. I mean that's that's just the way it is.
Mhm.
I didn't think that was a brilliant statement, by the way, Geoff. I mean, that to me was kind of obvious based, just from watching tape. So here's a great example, though. I mean, they decide to play man, and
Mhm.
you see DeJean on Kelsey, who's number two to trips down below, and he just jams him off the ball. I mean, and, this
Up top,
is,
you see Mitchell also very,
yeah,
very tight there too. I think this is Worthy, if I'm not
I think
mistaken.
it is worthy. Is this the one where he ran with him all the way?
No, that's not
No,
the.
no, okay. But
But
they're
what's
playing
going
man.
on? What do you see them trying to do from a route concept on the bottom of the screen here?
Oh, this was this is what the only dime snap in the game. That's
Yes.
Rodgers.
Yep.
This was their only dime snap in the game. They wanted this to be a natural pick and they wanted to hit the wheel route to, is that Worthy?
That might be Worthy, actually. Then maybe this is Juju up top.
I'll tell you what, this was an unbelievably good play by Rodgers because
Mhm.
he's the guy who has to work through the traffic.
Yep.
And I tell you what, here's what I would love to know. I would love to know. We'll never know this. I mean, I'm going to try to find out. I won't be able to find out in the next 30 seconds. So, I'm wondering, go back to the beginning of this play, Geoff. See, I wonder if they had a sense of what this play was, and that's why DeJean stepped up and pressed Kelsey, because what that did is it allowed Rodgers access to get behind DeJean and not get caught up in the pick, because
Mhm.
they're calling this play as a natural pick play so that Worthy, if that is indeed Worthy,
Mhm.
Worthy can run the wheel route or rail route and be wide open. That's the design of the play. You can see
Yep.
that's where Mahomes wants to go with the ball, and he looks and he looks over there and sees that that ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
You know,
I wasn't
this is
sure. I was trying to look at Mahomes here, and I'm like, was he looking at Kelsey the whole way, or is he trying to get
no. This
Mahomes?
play is designed to hit the wheel route
Yeah,
and
that's what
with
you would
Rodgers
think.
being picked,
Yeah.
and it didn't show.
Right.
It
And
didn't
then of
show.
course I would think that the other two middle receivers would be the progression, but look how well they're, as you were
There,
mentioning earlier,
yeah,
look how
yeah.
well they're covered up.
And look and again, look how physical Mitchell is on the top of the screen. Because
Right.
technically then you can come back and try to hit the in breaker. You
Mhm.
look to trips to the design of the play, and then you
Right.
come back and you try to hit the in breaker, and Mitchell just ate up Smith Schuster. This was their only snap a dime in the game, and Rodgers was phenomenal.
Yeah, I really like that play because I did realize as I was clipping it, I'm like, we didn't see a whole lot of Dime and Rogers from them
Only
before.
snap a dime in the game. And again, yeah, that makes me wonder. They did it so well, why he never came back to it. But obviously, he's smarter than both of us, so he's got a plan, and I think the plan worked okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say you do what you need to do, and maybe they just felt like they didn't need to do it anymore.
Yeah,
All right. Let us go show another form of pressure here that I liked. This is again first quarter. This is Josh Sweat where he's going to create some pressure.
this
That
is the
okay.
play I was talking about. They knew because of the way the Eagles play cover four
Hmm.
that Worthy is number three. He ends up being number one, but you don't know that. So
Right.
Bond has to match him. He has to match him because of the two receivers to that side of the formation, to the boundary. Worthy's just going to get on top of Bond because as good as one is, he's not going to run with Worthy, and that's
Right.
the play. I mean, if he has time to throw this, this is probably a touchdown.
Yep.
But this was the play I was talking about, where because they emptied the backfield, it's one-on-one protection,
Mm.
and this is where Sweat, just with the one-on stab, ate up Tooney and forced Mahomes out of the pocket. You can see it from here. You'll see the one-arm stab, and you can see Tooney reaching with his arms. He can't reach Sweat.
Right. He's a shorter arm guy because yeah, he doesn't even get a punch on him. Look
He's
at
a
that.
guard
He got his hand in his chest before he
in
can
his
get
chest, so he's
he
just
never
shoving
gets
him
his
back.
hands in there. Yeah.
He can't reach him. He can't reach him to stop him, and that causes Mahomes to move. And even Smith does a pretty good job on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
You got to get off
so a
your bottom.
design play, which because this was 3rd and 3, a design play that could easily have been a touchdown with time. Because look where Mahomes is looking, and then
Yeah.
he feels he's looking to it. That's the play.
Yep.
That's why they put Worthy in the backfield because they knew that that's how it would be played by the Eagles defense.
Right.
But and Mahomes normally doesn't miss those because Worthy had 3-4 steps on Vaughn.
Yeah. A nice job by Carter with the double team to make sure he gets into the middle to take out that climb up lane. Right. I mean,
Yep.
it's right here.
Yep.
You're thinking, all right, he can maybe climb and run up the middle because that's what Patrick Mahomes does. But Carter still fights to get to the center of that pocket. Okay, Greg, you've mentioned this play. We're going to diagnose what makes it so interesting. It's the Cooper DeJean second quarter
Yeah. So
6.
So what you see, Geoff, is they start with trips to the top of the field. You can see that there's 3 receivers, but they're going to take P. Ryan, and he's going to move to that side as well. So they're going to run 4 routes to one side of the field. And look what the Eagles are in. They're in a 2 shell, as they were on every single snap, pre-snap. And they're trying to overload the zone, flood the zone is what the term is, because you just don't have enough bodies. So you can see as you run this, Geoff, that's exactly what they're trying to do. So you see P. Ryan cross over, but you can see that Slay matches the outside route. Gardner Johnson will match the number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Now number 3 ends up staying in to help block. So what they do to bring the other guy over is Hopkins from the other side is going to run the crosser, so it still becomes 4 strong. So there's 4, that's what we call it, 4 receivers to one side. But notice how they match the routes and they do a great job. So now what happens is DeJean is kind of free. He's reading the routes, he's reading Mahomes, and Mahomes just, I don't know. Only Mahomes could tell you what he saw because he certainly didn't see DeJean because he
Mm-hmm.
threw it right to him. But the Eagles matched this about as well as you can match it.
Yeah, it's weird because if this is zone coverage, I wonder if Cooper, again, this goes back to his natural feel. He knows that the 2 deep routes are behind him. There's one here. I wonder if he
Yeah,
kind of
Vaughn
felt
has the
like,
flat,
yeah,
so now he's
yeah,
he's
right. He
great.
sees ball in there, so he can afford to sort of freelance in his zone a little bit because there's no one there.
There's no one there.
What a natural feel for that. And that was a good pick too. Yeah, he stepped in front of it.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, definitely not Mahomes' best throw. He's throwing across his body, but
This is the kind of play that made you realize that Mahomes is just not seeing it
right,
because we've seen him, make plays like this where he runs out and that's his secret sauce. I mean, his spatial awareness and understanding of where people are high level, maybe the best in the league. But he
right.
clearly did not see DeJean because he threw it right to him.
Yep. Is that Josh Sweat providing the lead block there on
There you go.
Caliendo or Tooney or somebody like that? And then you go, look at this. There's 2 guys in front of him at the 5, and he still wiggles his way. He's a strong guy.
And we talked about this, Geoff, you and I, about the Iowa, when you come from Iowa. I mean, and we've seen all season long, we've talked about this on our shows where DeJean just has a great feel in zone coverage for routes, reading the quarterback. I mean, he just has a feel for that.
right.
And, I don't know, I, I'm not a DB coach or I don't know, but I don't know if you can teach that kind of feel. You can teach a guy to read routes and all that, that's more technical, but I think he just has a feel for it.
I'm starting to think, Greg, if they can play this Vic Fangio defense, which he's not going anywhere, that if they want to move him to the outside, I think he has the instincts, the athleticism.
Yep.
He's fast. I don't know if he's twitchy, but he's fast enough. I mean, he could be a good complement to Quinyon Mitchell on the outside. I think he
That's going
could.
to be an interesting offseason, question because Slay's 34. He's not the same player he was.
Hmm.
What's his contract status?
He's got a year left, but he's talked a little bit about maybe wanting to play a year, maybe retiring. I think it's hard to see him back because the Eagles are going to have to, get younger and shed some salary, especially if they want to bring back Bond or Milton Williams or
Or
Beck,
both.
two or the three. Yeah, however it's going to go. So,
So
as of
let's
right
assume
now,
he's not back. I mean, just
yeah,
for the sake of discussion, if he's not back, I could see them drafting a corner, but that's a fascinating discussion, what you just said, whether they look at DeJean as an outside corner in this system,
yeah.
because this is a zone-based system, and maybe he doesn't work if you're playing a ton of press man or a ton of but in this system, maybe he works.
All right, one last one on defense. We'll take a look at Jalen Hunt, who you mentioned earlier in this game. Here he's lined up over left tackle, Greg, and
Was
in
this,
stand-up
was this the
spot.
sack?
It is the sack.
Yeah, this was the sack where I guess Hunt and Sweat got half a sack, but this was really a Jalix Hunt play. He
Right.
just drove Tooney right back into the pocket. And this is where he was one-on-one with Tooney, and they double teamed Sweat with Kelsey and the back. But
Mhm. And once again, I mean, like you said, too high structure. Everything out of too high.
everything, yeah. So by the way, go back to the beginning.
Hmm.
So this is cover six because they're playing cover two down below because look at Blankenship race back
Hmm.
and you can see Mitchell sort of squeeze.
Hmm.
Um, he's a roll down corner, and then they're playing cover four up top.
Right.
So, and by the way, Mahomes, th this may have been. I'd have to start whipping through my notes. I typed 9 pages. This may have been their first snap of this because if you notice Mahomes, he immediately looked down below to try
Hmm.
he wanted to throw the hitch to Brown, which would have been there in cover four, but then
Hmm.
he saw that Mitchell was a rolled up corner and he said, I can't throw that because if
Right.
I throw it, that could be picked to go the other way.
Yep.
So he couldn't throw this ball, even though they made a play call based on the fact that they were likely to get cover four, which had been the foundational coverage that the Eagles had been playing.
Hmm.
But
Yep.
when it's cover two, the corners roll down.
Now, for some reason, I mean, he could have had a bit of a gimme here at the top of the screen. I think that's worthy because he has the leverage to kind of hit him really quickly. He's not going to get a huge gain out of it unless he breaks a tackle, but he
I mean,
just
yeah, this was one
decides
of
not
those
to
plays
throw it.
where, again, only Mahomes could tell you what went through his mind.
Mhm.
I can't tell you that.
Right. Good jam on the inside receiver there from DeJean
Which
again.
they're really good at, by the way, and that's a major
Yes.
part. You know, when I had a chance to talk to a coach who's a fan Joe guy, I'm going to just pull on my notes right now.
Hmm.
And one of the things that he talked about, I'm just trying to find them, those notes. Let's see. Um, Quarters flat defender and quarter structure must disrupt release of number two. I mean, that's a big deal for
Hmm.
the Vic Fangio scheme.
Yeah, and you see that. There's
Yep,
disruption there. He's got his hands on him. So much different than last year and all those free releases and the off coverage.
yep.
And those little things help that pass rush get there. Now, look, two guys. I mean, because you see the left guard try to rotate over to Hunt here at the last second, but his momentum is already taken him past the left tackle Taylor.
Yeah, did you have this from the end zone?
Yes, I do.
Because you can really see Hunt's strength here. I mean, you know, obviously he was a safety at Cornell, but now you're dealing with a guy that's 6'4", 255.
Right.
And
Long arm,
and
too.
and he has a little bit of a runway here. And he
Yep.
gets that. See how this is really good hand usage for a guy that was learning throughout the season because
Uh,
he forced Tooney to use his right hand, and then he was able to get his right hand into Tooney's chest.
right there.
And once you do that, a guy can weigh 350 pounds. Once you get his chest is exposed, that's
Yep.
a tough deal.
Yeah, because he's moving backwards. So it's very
Yep,
hard for
yep,
a guy moving backwards with an exposed chest to be able to maintain their anchor. And by the way, hands to the face here on Jalen Hunt. His helmet, right? Tooney's got his right hand
yep,
on
yep,
now, and he's still pushing him back, closing the pocket. And
yep.
I think he's done a really good job of this too, Greg, for a rookie especially. He's really good at shedding when he gets blocked to get off that, especially in run defense, to get off the block and then make the tackle. We've seen
Well,
that quite a
great,
bit.
great edge pass rushers, and he's not a great edge pass rusher at this point in his career, but that's just a general statement.
Right.
They know how to initiate contact and then
Mhm.
play off the contact. That's what, because you just can't run around guys in the NFL, so you have to be able to initiate it and play off it. So you're the proactive one.
Hmm. Absolutely. All right, let's just take a look at we'll take a look at the Devonta Smith touchdown because a lot of people have asked about it.
Yeah, that's great play. There's a context to this because this was the seventh snap of pistol, and the previous six were running plays. And this was at a 12 personnel balance formation. When I say balance, the two tight ends are wings on each side, and both receivers have plus splits. So they're running a route combination that has a quarters beater element to it to the top of the screen, where they're running a post and a corner or a post in and out.
Mhm.
And then they're also running, this also has a built-in cover three beater, which is the post at the top and the cross down below by, I believe that's AJ Brown.
Mhm.
So built into this route concept is a quarters beater and a cover three beater, Jeff.
Right,
And they ended up getting quarters because it doesn't show as quarters right now. It
right.
shows after, as the ball snapped. This is a really good job by Jalen recognizing that because he has to do the fake. And then when he turns, he sees that it's the first thing you're taught is find the safeties. That's the way it works. Find the safeties. Is it two shell? Is it single high? You got to find the safeties. You know,
Hmm.
um, so he looks at the safeties and he sees it's two. So now he's going to the quarters beater, and that's to the left side of the formation because you got the post and you got the out because the safety has to play the out. So what
Hmm.
essentially happens is you get Smith one-on-one with the corner and there's no help over the top. And because of the Brown factor, my guess is that Brian Cook down below is more concerned about Brown because he's the only one that can really overlap this throw.
Right.
And he's obviously, he's focused on Brown.
Yep. And then boom. They picked on Mr. Watson quite a bit in this game. He's not the fastest guy in the world, and now he's going up against someone who's not only fast but a good route technician.
I mean, this is beautiful play call, beautiful execution, good ball,
Great
you know,
ball. Really good ball.
touchdown. I
Yeah.
mean,
I mean, I know
this
this
is
is
this.
his strength, and he had plenty of time, but I'm gonna give him credit. I mean, it's a really nice throw. Just like the
Oh, it's a
one
great
Hope
ball.
made later in the game to Worthy. It sort of gets lost in it, but that was a great throw too.
Great throw.
Yeah.
Beautifully designed, great play call, perfect execution. I mean, that's the kind of play where the coach is up in the booth. Kellen Moore's he's on the field, right?
Moore's on the field, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the
For
coach is up in the booth. That's where they're hooting and hollering. I mean, great play call. It could beat multiple coverage, as I said, and just brilliant. I mean, and great execution. Smith won easily off the ball, and Hurts made a great throw. Just, that's beautiful. That was the moment where
yeah.
I said, I may start walking back to the hotel soon.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's been a great season. I think Eagles fans would agree, Greg. It's been a fantastic Eagles season. It ends in a Super Bowl championship, and it's been a great season here on Inside the Tape with you. So, really, thank you for all your great tape breakdowns all year long.
Jeff, it's so much fun. I mean, I hope we continue and do, look at the league, look at the draft, because that's what I'm doing. I'm grinding away now, watching guys, and it's which takes time, as you know. But it's a change in mentality for me, so I kind of like it.
Sure, sure. And as you know, I'll get very obnoxious with all the Penn State and Big Ten guys with you pretty
Yeah, I
soon.
got to watch Penn State's defense. I haven't done that yet. So, although I keep reading about the Winston kid who didn't play this year. I did him
Yeah, he's a
last
good
summer,
player.
and he's a
Safety.
really interesting prospect. But he got hurt in the first game and didn't play. But yet people seem to think he's a top 90 type pick. But obviously, I can't do him this year. He got hurt in the first game. But he's big. He'll be an interesting guy. He may end up being a great player. You never know.
There you go. Well, that's a good tease for what's to come in the offseason on Inside the Bird. So, for the very last edition of Inside the Tape of the 2024 season, for Greg Cosell, I'm Geoff Mosher. We thank you all for watching along.